We're going to get things rolling here. So I'm the moderator for this panel. My name's Phil LaMoreaux. I work with the Department of Environmental Services in the Air Resources Division. Part of my work is collaborating with other states on implementation of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. I'm also part of a small team that's working on the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which EPA has provided some funding to us to update our state's climate action plan. So my background is in residential weatherization. I worked with the New Hampshire Saves programs through New Hampshire Electric Cooperative for about 10 years. Through that exposure to the utility side of things, I developed an interest in utilities and the good things that they can do. I have a lot of optimism for the potential for improvement of what we currently have in the future. So, and my goal here, just to give you an overview of the panel discussion, Angie does have some slides that she's going to provide, but the majority of our panel today on economic development, energy innovation, and climate planning is going to be a panel discussion. I will let our presenters introduce themselves and kind of talk about their roles and some of their projects, but my goal is just kind of to seed discussion and manage that. We'll try and have 45 to 50 minutes of panel discussion. We'll try to leave 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions from the audience and interaction. So with that, I'll introduce Deb Chisholm first.
Nice, I picked the right side.
Take that. Did you want to go?
No, I was just commenting how I picked the correct side to be last. So.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for coming. My name is Deb Chisholm. I am the Sustainability Department Manager for the City of Nashua. My background is mostly decades of working with engineering companies and hazardous waste cleanup. My work at the City of Nashua started back in 2005 as a brownfields coordinator, and so now I look sort of retroactively and go, oh, well, that was sort of the beginning really of my sustainability goals is through land use. So I worked for the city back then for several years, went back into private sector work, and now my job here, I call it Nashua 2.0. I've been with the city again since 2018, started as the waterways manager, where my role primarily was doing oversight of operation and maintenance of the city's 2 hydroelectric facilities, doing floodplain management, aquatic invasive species management, and pretty much whatever else they told me to do. Thankfully, one of the things that we've done recently, starting in 2022, was the development of a sustainability department within the city of Nashua. Managed to rope in our energy manager, Doria Brown, to help me tag team that. And we've since hired on a new employee only a couple of months ago. So now we are a department of 3, which I'm finding to be fantastic. A lot of issues going on relative to sustainability, and happy to have a department for the city to be able to sort of pull from all of our other departments. As you know, sustainability is not a single topic, but many. And so trying to work together with other departments has really been a struggle, I'll be honest with you. But what we're doing right now is we're pulling together a sustainability climate resiliency plan for the city that will help sort of be a foundation on how we move forward with the city. So more on that later. And I'll hand it over to Angie Cleveland.
Seems easier to just hold it than speak like this. And I can hand it right over to Brian really quickly. I'm Angela Cleveland. I currently am the principal planner for Strafford Regional Planning Commission. And some of the pieces that I was invited to talk about today are my work in Strafford, but I think my background's a little more interesting than that. I have been involved in climate, sustainability, resilience planning since about 2001. I graduated from Antioch, and I think that's where I found my roots and my brain for both planning and all the things related to planning as a planner. And are there any planners in the room right now? Awesome. Yay. There's my peeps. You're all my peeps. But I found my brain in planning and realized that sustainability is part of our ethics. It's part of what we do as planners. And so it was a natural progression for me to then move into more sustainability planning. I started at the Nashua Regional Planning Commission and then moved to the city of Nashua, where Deb and I actually we started working before that together, and started the Energy Committee. And back then, that was the root of it was really our membership with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. But I had a lot of passion for that because, again, as a planner, I felt it was my responsibility to wrap that into all of our work. And the Energy Committee was a great opportunity to start that conversation with all the departments and learn really how we all need to be working together in order for us to accomplish our energy goals. Back then, we were just saying energy and climate, but obviously sustainability and resilience have been added to those discussions because they're intertwined. So I then went to actually work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and I was the regional director for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And that really gave me a lot more insight into how far local governments really are taking this work and all the different folks that are behind that again. So learning that in Nashua was really key for me, but really breathing it and living it, seeing that DPW directors are at the table and town and city managers and even county managers for that matter, because I worked in New York as well. So, and then I took a leave of absence from the municipal world and went into private sector like Deb did, but still stayed with working with municipalities because I do believe that at the local and regional level, but local government is really where action happens. And I've been, again, kind of embracing that through the rest of my career with regional planning agencies, again, dipping in and out of working specifically on sustainability, but land use is really also where I found my passion for this, and understanding planning and how we live on the planet is really important. Today I'll be talking mostly about our EV charging station work, but I do again believe that most of my background on this panel is from my past and what I've done over the past 20-something years as a planner.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Brian Norton. I'm the president general manager at Loon Mountain up in Lincoln, New Hampshire. I'm pleased to be here. I'm thankful to be invited. I'm thankful to represent not just Loon, but Ski New Hampshire, which is the broader group that represents all of the ski resorts in New Hampshire, as well as the travel and tourism industry, and to be a voice for businesses in general here. I'm also thrilled to be here and learn from all of you and the other speakers and the other sessions. And this is a learning experience for me just as much as it is you guys. My goal today is to kind of give you some perspective from Loon's point of view, from the ski industry's point of view. It's where I'm most versed, obviously. I hope to not turn it into too much of a sales pitch, although, we hope that you ski with us. So I'll be talking about a variety of different things and initiatives that we've taken underway. For those of you that don't understand or aren't familiar with Loon, the ski area, so we're based right at the heart of the White Mountains, right in Lincoln, New Hampshire. It's kind of the gateway to all of the wonderful hiking and scenic vistas that are in that part of the world. Loon is the largest ski area in terms of ski visits in the state. We're also the largest in terms of employment. So we've got a really loud voice, and part of why we're here and part of this group is because we see ourselves as a leader and want to make sure that we're the loudest voice in the room that represents, not just Loon and our company, but our guests and our employees, because we represent so many of them. So Loon it's a 365-day-a-year operation. Winter's our primary business. But we do a lot in the summer as well, from mountain biking to scenic rides to different adventure activity type stuff, disc golf. We're the largest consumer of electricity in New Hampshire co-op territory. That's something I don't know that we're proud of, but we like to talk about. What's unique about that is that we're the largest consumer of electricity, and largely in a very small window, right? Like we're using energy year round, but most of it is related to snowmaking. So you'll hear me talk quite a bit about that and how we can continue to improve and refine our efficiencies in that. We're not just snowmaking, though. I mean, we have food and beverage outlets, lodges, and all of these other little bits and pieces that we need to be focused on. I like to joke and say that we've actually got the best electric transportation system in the state, being our ski lifts. So we're invested in a lot of different projects, and we manage all of them to meet our sustainability goals. We're part of the NSAA, National Ski Area Association, broad group. We've signed onto a climate challenge with them. We've got internal and external goals. We've worked with an outside party, Brendel Group, to develop a master plan, not just for Boyne, which is our parent company, but for our resort as a whole. We've also, in 2020, we introduced what we call Flight Path. It's our 10-year investment plan, right? And one of the biggest pieces of that Flight Path plan was our Forever project, and that's a company-wide, again, Boyne company-wide project where we weigh every decision against these sustainability goals, and in the end, by 2030, a big, hairy, audacious goal, as much as it is, but trying to be carbon neutral by 2030. And when you're the largest consumer of electricity, we got a long way to go. So we're focused on it and happy to share our experiences here today.
That's pretty awesome. I will say that based on my experience working with the co-op, Loon was always a great partner. I did get to administer a few energy efficiency rebate checks to them, to their facilities departments over the years. And I'm excited to hear that they are making snow as we speak. I think last night we got the first snow in Plymouth, and I'm looking forward to ski season.
Yeah, not a sales pitch, but 212 guns this morning at 6 a.m.
So let the snowmaking season begin. So the first question I'd like to pose to each of our panelists is just kind of, I'd like you to talk about some of the tools and resources you're using, and what your goals you're working towards with those tools and resources. Is that something, Deb, do you want to start us off? Or Angie?
I can start us. I already got the mic.
Go for it. Go, Brian.
I already got the mic. So,
We're on.
well, like I said, snowmaking being the largest piece of our electricity use, our fuel consumption from the greater grid, I suppose, a lot of our focus, a lot of our initiative is improving that system. And you heard me joking around about how many guns we were running with last night. And I can look at my phone right now and I can see exactly what we're using for energy, exactly where we're using it, how we're using it, how efficiently it is. On the snowmaking side, I can actually turn, if I really wanted to mess with the snowmakers, I could start turning some of those guns on and off right now from my phone. I won't do that to them, but I could if I wanted to. And where all that comes from, and probably the most important tool that we have, is understanding what we're using in the moment and being able to plan accordingly. I can look at what the ISO grid is costing for electricity, where the demand is, and make decisions in the moment about how we want to move forward, how we want to protect our investments on the mountain, because water freezes. We're moving water all around the mountain right now, and make sure that we can do what we're trying to do, accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, provide a product, an economic source for our guests, our business, our employees, in the most sustainable way possible. So I think the best tools that we have available to us outside of the technology itself, whether it's the snow gun or the heat pump or the electric trucks that some of our team are driving around, outside of the physical tools, the best thing that we can do is understand what we're doing and how we're doing it, and track it and manage it and put it into a plan and weigh everything against it.
So as a planner, we always say it starts with a plan. And when I'm doing research, and this is generally for my work, but especially when I was doing sustainability work or working for ICLEI and working with local governments, is to ask them to look into what they currently have. And there are a lot of different resources. So similar to the way you're looking at your data and energy use, and then we obviously have to bring in economic development into this situation. That's part of the panel discussion and title. That's what I do in my day job. So in addition to some of the work on this charging station guide that we created at SRPC, I manage our economic development program, and there's a lot of data out there, and just knowing where to find it can sometimes, if you're not sure what you're looking for, it can sometimes be daunting. But I have a couple of key places that I think go underserved or underutilized. The first is your regional plan. So whatever region you might be in, so for example, Strafford is mostly Strafford County, and a couple of communities in Rockingham and Carroll County is looking at the regional plan that we've created. So what does that look like for housing? What does it look like for your economic development? What does it look like for transportation? So that plan will engulf basically everything that has to do with your region. A lot of it also has demographics, which are really important, so you can understand who's in your region and then how that trickles down to the local level if you do serve on a local energy commission or an energy committee, sustainability committee. But looking at that regional plan is key. They're all in various stages around the state right now. So another key plan, if you're a regional planning agency, has one in operation, is a comprehensive economic development strategy, CEDS. We like to call it CEDS. So has anybody been involved in a CEDS? Yeah, sort of, yeah. Fun word if we throw it around a lot, but comprehensive economic development strategy. There are 3 economic development districts in the state, in the North Country, Strafford, and the Rockingham area. And they are required to put a CEDS plan together every 5 years, and it is chock full of great economic development and demographic data, which helps to understand your businesses, helps to understand when you know who the businesses are, you know how to gear some of your energy efficiency, your sustainability goals and initiatives. So understanding who they are is really key. But then also thinking about projections. So yesterday, BEA, Department of Business and Economic Assistance, had a conference on economic development, and they started talking through what we will see in the future as far as projections for the types of businesses that will be moving or expanding into New Hampshire. And understanding that is absolutely key into understanding what our load is going to be like. What are we going to need to do to our downtowns to be able to and our business parks and all of our communities in general to be able to accommodate that growth. How can we plan for more EV charging stations based on demand, which I know we're not going to cover all of the demand piece today. Go to the NHMA conference because we'll be talking about demand there as well for EV charging stations. But it is really important to understand, especially on the projections piece, but even today we're not meeting demand. So understanding that economic piece. And then I would say another key one, and this is more around the best practices, is if you haven't been involved with Lead for Cities yet, I would greatly encourage you to use that tool. So my most recent post was in Amesbury as the Community and Economic Development Director, and we were one of the lucky ones to be part of the Lead Ambassadors program. They bring, I think it's 13 to 15 communities through the Lead for Cities program, and that's a very beefy program. It covers everything you can possibly imagine for creating a sustainable community. But the metrics in there are great because it really gives you those initiatives and those solutions to addressing your sustainability challenges and opportunities in your community. So LEAD is fully available. You can look at the program, I shouldn't call it program, but the guide to achieving LEAD for Cities sustainability, LEAD for Cities certification. Also, I think that Nashua is still going through it. But both of us could serve as guides as well. But that is a very robust program that took years to put into place, similar to LEAD for buildings, but it's LEAD for cities. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that because I think it's even applicable for the private sector as well. So I'll give it over to Deb, who I'm sure has some other great solutions.
Thanks. I would reiterate some of the things that Angie had mentioned are super important. We are in the process of the Lead for Cities program, and I will tell you that was really that was the catalyst behind us actually starting up a sustainability plan, because we realized, and I guess I'm admitting this to the public right now, that we were almost trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. We found the data requirements for that program to be so robust that we needed to take a step back and actually start working closer with our other departments that would be providing the data, whether it's wastewater or DPW, economic development, the purchasing department. I mean, we had a lot of sort of holes to fill, and we realized that we needed to have a sustainability plan in place before we could get through that Lead for Cities program. But it's excellent, and understanding what the requirements are really made us stop and think, like, oh, wait a second here. So we're still hanging on by a thread to getting that, but in the meantime, we're in the process of a sustainability plan, and that for us was really what we needed to understand, and to have other folks in our municipality be more aware of what is needed to be a more sustainable and a more resilient community. So I would say probably the most important piece for us, and I know that some of you are members of your local, ours is the Environment and Energy Committee, but local energy committees within your communities, that was really the most important piece as far as I'm concerned, relative to the city moving forward with anything that was even remotely related to sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions. We've got a really great group. And I will tell you, our energy manager, Doria Brown, started with the Environment and Energy Committee as a member, and then we were able to steal her, and now she's the energy manager for the city. But speaking from a very local level, that was really the most important piece, and we're finding now that we've got like-minded folks who do work for the municipality that we didn't know before. And so that's become very helpful to, as we're establishing what our plan is for other folks in other departments to start working together. And we're hopeful that once the city can get its arms around what sustainability and community resilience are all about, we can then take that message out to the community to allow folks, whether they're businesses or citizens, to understand what they can do to be more sustainable, to be more resilient. And to speak relative to Brian and having that business, that for us is kind of a key. We're a municipality, and everything we do is paid for with taxpayer dollars. So we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and having public-private partnerships, I think, is a very important piece that we have used in the past and that we will continue to use. But again, for the municipality to sort of understand as a municipality what we're doing and to be able to set our goals and then go back out into the community and utilize what the community is thinking. Again, with that Environment and Energy Committee, everybody on that committee is either a resident or a business owner, and to understand what folks in our community are thinking, I think, was a very important piece of setting us in the right direction.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you. So my next question is really going to give you an opportunity to kind of highlight something that you're working on. What are, focus on a project or program that you're working on developing, and I'm going to ask you to kind of take some time to explain one, and we'll get into some more questions about that later. But Deb, do you want to go back this way this time? All right.
Well, as a larger municipality in the state, I would say a lot of people wear a lot of hats, but we do have a luxury of being larger. And so our sustainability department has 3 people in it. I'm not sure there are other communities that have a sustainability department at all. Doria has been a great asset for the city as the energy manager, and really is spearheading a lot of things. I know we've got a few things going on that are relevant and super important. I don't want to spend too much time talking about them. Maybe there's another panel talking either now or in the afternoon about Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. I know a lot of folks here have been involved in that and that development. And the city of Nashua was one of the initial communities involved with developing that whole program. And we're very proud of the fact that we are members of that. It took years to get to where we're at now. And Doria, of course, has spent hundreds and hundreds of hours of her time dedicated to making sure that that Community Power Coalition got things kicked off right. So I would say that the ability to save all of our residents some money on their electricity bills has been a very important achievement as we were part of the initial launch last spring. So we had that going on. Again, creation of a sustainability department has been huge. The city has made a commitment to its hydroelectric facilities. We are in the process of replacing all of the equipment in one of those facilities. They were both built back in the 1980s. And the city took ownership of them not within the last 10 years. So it's been a commitment that I'm very appreciative of, that the city has moved forward with both purchasing those two facilities and then actually committing to spending the money to making them compliant and more efficient. So again, that piece right there, understanding that we've got the support to be able to continue operating both of those facilities has been spectacular, to say the least. So those are kind of the two things. Well, we're also in the process of trying to pull together a microgrid. We've got the city of Nashua owns its own landfill. We still use it. And my best guess understanding is we've got another at least 30 years worth of landfill space there. So that's something that we're happy about. We also have a landfill gas to energy plant at the facility, and we are trying desperately to create a microgrid. We have a new Department of Public Works building that we just cut the ribbon on a few months ago, and we're trying to create a microgrid in that area that would basically power the entire DPW facility with the methane from the landfill. So fingers crossed as we try to move forward with that project as well.
So for us, we look at it's much like your personal life, right? Like everything that we're doing as a business, I'm doing in my personal life. You're weighing the money you have coming in and what you're spending it on and how you're achieving your goals. And I can compost at home. I can drive an electric vehicle at home. I can put heat pumps in my house at home. We're doing all those things on a much larger scale at the resort. And I think for us, the biggest piece is obviously snowmaking, and it's very easy for us, I think, to make a decision to focus our capital investments largely on that snowmaking piece because we use so much energy doing so, and at the same time, it contributes so much to the guest experience, which is why we're there, right? So it's an easy decision to focus on that. I don't want to dwell on that too much. What I would say is that all of the smaller projects that add up, all of those little things that we're doing here, there, that all of you can be doing in your personal lives are what I think is really making a difference and is what is getting our team and our community to buy into our projects. So, we're switching our company vehicle fleet where possible over to electric vehicles. Kevin, our marketing director that's in the room, both came here today in electric vehicles. We're working towards a composting program for all of our food and beverage facilities on the mountain. It's a big leap, particularly for some of the up mountain facilities. So we're doing it in a smaller step here, but we're working with a company called AgriCycle that's going to take our food and turn it into methane gas and turn it into electricity. And we're going to put less in the landfill and generate some electricity on the side for it. We're planning for the future. You'll hear us all talk about planning a lot today, but planning new lodges and facilities, and we're planning this new lodge in one of our base areas, and how are we going to heat that? How are we going to cool that? Well, geothermal. I don't know that we can do geothermal. We're exploring that. I don't know that the cost benefit analysis and the water and everything that you need to make that happen is there, but that's our first step. That's where we're going to start every time. And in the end, we might not get there, but that's where we're going to start, because that's what makes the most sense. Solar panels. We operate largely on Forest Service land, so we're somewhat limited because of the public-private partnership that we have and where we operate. But anywhere we can, anywhere the Forest Service is going to allow us to, we're going to install solar panels. We have this unique arrangement with a hotel that's right at Loon that everyone assumes is actually Loon. It's not Loon. The Mountain Club on Loon is a separate business, but we share some electrical infrastructure, and we worked very closely with them to kind of test out some solar panels, and they installed a bunch of solar panels on one half of their roof that is almost a test case for us to do it on one of our buildings. Camp 3 will be next. Upgrading and managing our heat systems. We have a ton of space that we need to heat and cool, mostly heat. And anytime something needs to get maintained, replaced, new building, new facility, whatever it is, we want to take that old oil burning furnace and turn it into a propane furnace, because it's 5x more efficient. And if we already have a propane one that we're looking to swap over, we're looking to do electric heat pumps. So anything we can do, and it's all those little incremental steps as a business that, again, we do in our personal lives, but it just makes a bigger impact because of how large the business is and how big the property is.
So I'm not sure how much you know about regional planning commissions in the state, but a majority of our funding comes from transportation sources. So U.S. Department of Transportation, which comes down to the New Hampshire Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. So a lot of what we're doing has a transportation lean, but luckily transportation infiltrates pretty much everything we do, kind of like land use planning does. So we, back when I started in May, there was some discussion around, and a lot of heat in the region, in a good way, around EV charging stations, and in the state in general, because of some upcoming funding through Volkswagen and other sources from the federal government. So when we were looking through this, and I was lucky that I have a lot of really smart and very inspired fellow staff folks who had started to put together some resources, but part of my job when I was in Amesbury, as I've mentioned, was around EV charging stations. I had inherited a new grouping of them, and for better or worse, was able to really kind of learn a little bit more about how to maintain them, why they went where they were, why they should have gone somewhere else, coordination with DPWs. And when I saw the list of resources that we were putting together, I thought, and heard that we were struggling a little bit in the state with deploying EV charging stations, we thought the natural next step would be to develop a guide. And I see Tad in the audience. I spoke with him last week, so this is going to be a little bit of a reiteration. But, as a planner, I feel I kind of have an obligation, thank you, to create things that build capacity. We shouldn't have to reinvent any wheels. Other communities are doing this. And so we thought, why not turn this into not just a PDF of instructions, but a story map, which is what this is called. So it's basically like a website. If you've worked with ArcGIS, it's an extension of that, that leads you through the process of installing EV charging stations. So we created a series of steps, and the beginning step really is the charging levels. We need to understand what level 1 is, level 2 is, fast chargers, why they are what they are, what their purpose is, and do that in the most appealing way possible. A lot of websites just drone on and on and on. And we created, that's why the story map idea was really something that we felt was going to be appealing and easy for anybody to use. We thought this could be, from the DPW director, public works folks, to to folks like yourselves who are either leading a community department, or you're on an energy committee, or you're in a regional planning agency, whatever your level is, that you could take this and run with it, and somehow it has some relevance to your work. So each of these levels literally has just a short step of what the level is, how much they cost to implement and to maintain, and then recommended levels of location in your community, so that it's kind of taking a little bit of the mystery out of that piece, because again, if you're not familiar with EV charging stations or some of the intricacies around this, that you were the person that we looked at when we developed this charging station guide. Then we went into how many. There are a variety of, I'm not going to dip into each of these because it looks the same, and I know you can't read it from the screen, but the idea here is to get an idea about the functionality of this. So hopefully this will be something that you go geek out on later today when you have time. But ultimately, how many is really the question for a lot of communities, especially if you're not going to be if as a municipality, you may not be the one actually installing it, but rather incentivizing private businesses or partnering with ChargePoint or other EV charging station installers to increase the number and to hopefully meet demand. I should start with the stat that a part of us, and this is Chris Skogland's CE&H thing, is that tourism is our second top largest industry here in the state, which is another reason why I was really excited that we have Loon at the table, and recognizing that and knowing that a lot of these charging stations will be, especially during our winter times, but even in the summer, used by our friends in Massachusetts, our friends in Maine, in Vermont, in Quebec. And I live in the North Country, so I'm seeing all these folks infiltrating our state, but yet there's not enough places for them to charge. So that was also an impetus here, and that goes to the how many piece. There are some great tools out there that the federal government has put together that helps you to estimate based on population growth, based on some, the tourism industry, to help you think about what that looks like to actually start meeting demand. The funding tab is going to be where we're probably going to be focusing. There are a couple tabs. This one and the installation regulation tabs is where we're going to be focusing on keeping this updated. So there's funding coming in, as I mentioned, from the federal government, but there are a variety of other unique ways to fund these EV charging stations as well. And I don't want this to become a how to implement EV charging station guide. So come to the New Hampshire Municipal Association conference session, and we'll talk more about that. Where to install is important as well. We talk about that our downtowns are in severe need of that. Folks, they've taught, there's stats out there that talk about folks who have EVs, that they will patronize places over and over again, especially downtowns, if that's a place where they can comfortably go and charge for 30, 50, 2 hours. So thinking about that as an economic development tool is absolutely going down the right path. And ski mountains, our forests, our national forests, like those should be places where people can use level 2 charging stations comfortably and have them available so that they can then go on their merry way when they're done spending money and hiking and doing the things that they do in New Hampshire. Charging fees is another one that is kind of a mystery for some communities, and another one that I really wanted to make sure we covered in depth in this. And this is if you decide to charge fees. So that's, some communities decide that this is going to be something free for a couple of years, whether you got that through a grant. Some of the Volkswagen grants in Massachusetts, there are still some state funds coming down the pike for EV charging stations. And we wanted to take the mystery out of that, but there literally are a million ways to slice and dice how you can charge fees, whether it's by demand, time of day. You could even change it by the day for certain events if you wanted to charge more, or you wanted it to be a maximum of 2 hours instead of 3 hours, or there are also fees related to like the amount of kilowatts that you're using, that you're actually generating from the charging station. So taking a look at this, because we did a lot of research both within New Hampshire, in New England, and then beyond, and there are a lot of really great best practices from our fellow communities who have taken this by the horns and really made some good progress on EV charging station deployment. The next ones are around signage. It's important to remember not just at the station itself, but wayfinding. You got to let people know where they are and that they are available. Sometimes, especially if they're brand new, they may not show up on a ChargePoint app or any other apps for EV charging stations. So making sure your signage is clear is really important and accessible. Accessibility was a key direction for us in this as well as accessibility for anybody with various abilities. We need to make sure that these charging stations are available for everyone. Policy enforcement, we're going to talk over and over about collaboration, but your DPW, your police, your fire need to be on board with these EV charging stations. So getting them up front and talking to them about how you're going to enforce whether someone is in this, someone who's not an EV is parking in that spot, if they're over their 2 hours or whatever the limit is. And then with your anything related to batteries right now, we need to make sure that if there's a fire, that emergency management knows where where to go for that, and that your city or town clerks also understand what the policy enforcement is. Because if you're a regular resident and you go to town hall or city hall, that's probably where you're going to start to ask questions about EV charging stations. Same with maintenance, talking with DPWs, if you have a maintenance program, letting them know, and town clerk and your mayor and your town manager, because they're always going to be the ones people will call up and ask, oh, this station is broken, what should I do, or who should I call? So regular communication around that maintenance, and also incorporating that into your charging fees, because station maintenance can be upwards of $5,000 a year for warranties. So that's important. And then the last one is around installation regulation, and I'll dip into this a little bit. There are communities that are starting to develop site plan regs, design regs, and other ways to manage both the installation as well as the maintenance, and just long-term. Sorry, this isn't working. I'm not a Mac person. And the long-term, I guess I'll just say maintenance of EV charging stations on properties, especially public properties, but obviously private properties too. So we looked at the various ordinances that are out there right now regarding, how many are on a site, where are they in relationship to the building, how far apart are they? So lots of different regulations. Maine has made a lot of progress here, but so has Dover. If you have a chance to take a look at the Dover site plan regs and their parking space ordinance. We didn't have a chance to update Merrimack's yet, but they also have good site plan regs regarding charging stations. And then, believe it or not, around signage, because some of these, if you've been to some of the bigger ones that are coming out, they have big blinking signs, and depending on where they're putting them, that can become a nuisance for residents or even for businesses. So taking a look at that, while we don't want this to become something that is an obstacle for EV charging station deployment, we definitely don't. We also need to think about is this actually a land use going forward, especially the larger Tesla station deployments that we've seen, where there's upwards of like 12 to 15 stations employed. But this is going to be one that we're definitely going to keep up to date, because we want, again, people to understand that they don't have to start from scratch when developing these types of tools for their own municipality. I know that was long, and apologies.
I just want to back that up a little bit. And one of the projects that we were working on this summer is adding more electric car charging stations. And the reason is because I carry a radio around all day, and the most common employee question over the radio is, I got so-and-so here, and they want to know if there's any more electric car charging stations. So it's a real thing. There's demand, particularly in the tourism industry, particularly in the black hole of EV charging that is the White Mountain and northern New Hampshire region. And I hope that if nothing else, people come out of this today with, we need to work on that.
And I'll add, as a resident of Nashua and an EV owner, I have a hard time trying to vacation past the Lakes region. Even in the Lakes region, it's a challenge to get up there and know that I have something there that is consistent, that doesn't require me to go to a car dealership somewhere at 10 o'clock at night and hope it's not behind a gate. What the city of Nashua is doing, we've got a few chargers. Again, I think we're woefully inadequate to support the number of electric vehicles that come through the city. We've got some, of course, at our as you know, tax-free mall area, which is great for our Massachusetts friends. But one of the things that we're talking about now, to what Angie said, relative to our land use code, which coincidentally we are in the middle of updating and upgrading, is the requirement for multifamily developments to have EV charging stations. Now, some of the planners are interested in indicating that we want the infrastructure to be ready. Others of us want the chargers to be ready to go the minute somebody goes to move into this new development. So again, a little bit of concern on at what stage do we want these chargers to be up and running. But we're telling folks now, if you're coming to the planning department with a development plan for a particular area, and you have not gone to the planning board process yet, maybe you're 2 years out. Well, 2 years from now, you should have that charger already up and running when your development has the ribbon cutting ceremony. It shouldn't be that you put the infrastructure in and now you have to go out and find the charging. Not a fan of that. I'm 100% behind the charging station has to be there. How many do we need? That's the part where we'll be negotiating that as far as revising our land use codes. The other issue that Nashua is dealing with now is trying to convert municipal vehicles. And I want to couch this with the understanding that right now we're talking about the low-hanging fruit of passenger vehicles and maybe light-duty trucks. We're not talking necessarily about trying to replace every single vehicle to use an alternative fuel. Many of our trash trucks in the city are compressed natural gas. And we certainly are also not of the mindset that we want to be replacing any vehicles before their lifespan is over. But trying to figure out, we've got, again, a new DPW facility that has 6 charging units right in front of the building. So anytime I'm there for a meeting, I'm happy to go and plug my car in for a little bit of free power. But that being said, we also have 3 Nissan Leafs that are supposedly showing up sooner rather than later. And I'll tell you now, we're scrambling to figure out where we're going to charge them because these vehicles will be for our public health department, which is downtown, and has no charging infrastructure at it. So I'm actually excited about it, that they're coming earlier than we expected, because it's really getting people to step up to the plate and say, okay, what are we doing here? So hopefully putting some additional charge. We have 3 chargers in the parking garage adjacent to City Hall, which you pay for the parking space and you get the energy for free. So come on down if you're interested. So we're contemplating putting in additional charging stations, but the problem is trying to figure out how to keep the public from charging at those stations when a municipal vehicle needs to be charged. And so we've got a little bit of a conundrum going on there. We want them to be available to the public, but we also want public health to be able to come back at 5 o'clock and be able to plug that vehicle in if needed. And if it's full with, with people from the public, then we've got a little bit of a problem. So we're in the process of trying to figure that piece out, but otherwise I think we're again trying to move forward with the charging stations.
Even though I'm not really a panelist here, I can say that the state is rolling out some of the VW funds that have been mentioned. There are contracts that are being put in place right now to utilize some of the existing VW settlement money to put up EV fast chargers. In addition to that, currently New Hampshire DOT has a significant pot of money from the federal Highway Administration under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, NEVI. And just for anybody who's considering an EV, within the next few years, you'll see no fewer than 4 fast chargers within a mile of each major highway, no more than 50 miles apart. So that's kind of the standard that is happening in every state throughout the country right now. No more than 50 miles apart, no more than a mile from the highway, and 4 DC fast chargers. So that's in the works right now. It takes time. Paul might might understand this, but doing anything in state government takes a little bit of time. So I'm new to that, but it's happening. So that's good news. So we do have a lot of questions that I can ask our panelists, but I think I'm seeing a lot of inquisitive minds in the audience, and I'm thinking that, recognizing we have about 20 minutes left, I'd like to open the floor to questions and recognize that we're going to have some interactive discussion here. Yeah, Paul, if you want to handle that one, we can share this one up here. So I see a question already. Let's go to our audience here. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. It was great to hear about EV chargers. I'd love to hear about what you're doing to encourage solar, particularly in regional or citywide. I think Nashua did SolSmart, but I'm not sure.
Great question. We have, in the past, we've done a solarized campaign. It was pre-COVID, and are hoping to do one perhaps this summer. But it is something that we are focusing on. I know I walk every day, and I go through neighborhoods that have, it's clearly the neighbors spoke to each other, and there are 3, 4, 5 homes in a row now with solar on their roofs. The municipality itself, we've got solar on our transit building, one of our fire stations, and are anticipating putting out an RFP in the not too distant future for our school district, trying to put solar on rooftops of all of our schools. And that's looking very promising. We've got several that already have them. Of course, you have to time that solar, rooftop solar installation with the life of the roof. And so we're also looking at that added cost of not just installing the solar, but making sure we've got rooftops that'll last at least the lifetime of the solar install itself. I know one of the things that we're also talking about is trying to figure out how to get solar on top of our parking garages, which are in a bit of disrepair at this point based on their age. But trying to understand what the capacity is on the rooftops of 2 of our parking garages to try to put, essentially putting rooftop solar, which will also allow coverage for vehicles that are parked up on that top level. Does that answer your question?
Any for surface parking lots?
At this time, we've gone under the impression that for doing parking lots, the cost is a little bit more than we're crazy about. But I know that, again, there's so much federal and state funding out there. Again, that's one of the problems. I don't know about other communities, but we have a grant writer, and we're still challenged to try to figure out, with all the money that's available, what works for us and what doesn't. There are probably 100 different solar opportunities out there, but do we actually fit into the niche of some of the eligibility requirements? That becomes a little problematic.
If I can add one comment there, I had a nice conversation with one of the solar designers this morning, and I think one of the things that's coming up with solar is that utilities are actually running up against hosting capacity issues. So, part of the challenge with interconnection is that, on the sunniest days of spring, when it's cold and sunny and you're making a lot of energy and there's not a lot of load on the grid, we're actually at a point already where we can have enough energy that there's nowhere for the energy to net meter to. So I think at some point we need to be thinking about, storage to better manage the power we're using, because you can't, net metering's great up to a certain point, and we're doing that, but we're almost at the point where we need more hosting capacity or better demand. As the talk this morning was, we need more resources to better manage that demand response or the active demand stuff. Paula, did you want to bring the mic up for this? Oh, there's another one.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
Hi, James Dumont. I'm here in my private role as a commissioner on the Bedford Energy Commission, but professionally, I am a grant writer and strategist on clean transportation, advanced energy, $400 million secured to date on that front. So my job in professional world is helping my company prepare for the climate pollution reduction grants and the Clean Ports program. We don't have a clean port so much here. We got Portsmouth, but I'm curious here today, how can we as a small community in Bedford partner up with the larger cities like Manchester and Nashua and replicate this model so that we can attract as much climate pollution reduction grant funding as possible, recognizing applications are due April 1st of next year to get $4.6 billion. We have one shot at this as a state, and if we miss it, we're really missing out on 2030 opportunities since these dollars are good through 2032. I would like to recommend further 30% of whatever request we make should go to planning for these communities and the regional efforts. And then I believe 70% should go towards implementation through 2032 after we get these plans developed, with some earlier efforts to get deployments in place. But love to hear how we can partner up on this.
The DES is still, there's a website up with a link. You can sign up for information. We're still trying to work on the outreach part, but we are working on it.
I just saw you updated yesterday.
Yep. Thank you.
So I'll pitch the regional planning commissions again. If you haven't been in touch with Southern, Manchester's your neighbor, and we do believe that regional planning agencies and commissions should be hopefully the first line of fire for those intermunicipal collaborations. And I'll give you an example, and it's kind of to the solar point. In the Strafford region, there are several communities that are working on solar ordinances. But again, we don't have to start from scratch. There are actually some great models out there. Rochester put together a great solar ordinance recently and is actually going to be revising it again based on just demand and especially freestanding installations, private freestanding. So touching base with the regional planning agency would be key, because there's likely that reciprocity that they're interested in working as well, both on the capacity side, because to your point, you're smaller and it's not always available. These opportunities will not, they may not come about again. So, and I like your percentage 30-70. That's great, because it is tough when you see a lot of planning, money getting spent on planning and not implementation. So we think that's key. So hopefully you can get in touch with Southern. Yeah, and I'm happy to help if you need it. Okay.
I thought there was somebody ahead of me, but no, okay. Were you pointing to someone? Was it you, sir?
I think I've lost my.
I'm sorry, we're taking up time. We'll make sure that we get this done. I was on STE for 3 terms. Am I getting feedback? I'm sorry. And we step away from the wall. The big picture is almost never addressed, and particularly with economic development, and then climate planning. So what I really feel like I'd like to hear from you people is, what are we going to do about what's happening in Berlin with the loss of the biomass plant? I mean, why is this state not investing in some sort of alternative energy that uses cellulosic fiber? I mean, we've got all this waste wood that we need to get out of the forest so we don't have forest fires, because climate says we're going to have more forest fires. Where's the nexus for us to get together and use these federal funds that have a deadline? They're available. So that's, just wanted to throw that out there.
I don't know as much as Clean Energy New Hampshire does about the new climate plan and whether that's being addressed. Or Deb, do you know? Anybody in the room know anybody about the climate plan that's being developed right now? I'm hoping that would be addressed in that.
I support the idea of using. It certainly seems like New Hampshire has an excess of forest byproducts that, in my mind, make a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense to get some generation out of them. One of the things that the CPRG grant, a lot of states are looking at is forest biomass. There's some thought that, carbon sequestration in forest soils is also a significant asset. So, there's a lot of research to do there, but at the same time, I think we have generation in state already, and my thinking is that we have a renewable portfolio standard that helps incentivize that generation, the cost effectiveness, and I'm wondering if that needs, if the the requirements of the RPS need to be tweaked to make that more effective at this point. That's my thought.
I think the RPS just expired. We had a goal of getting to 24, and we've already deadlined the amount, and it's falling off a cliff. So that's not helping. And I mentioned the Berlin plant, but on the cellulosic front, it doesn't have to be burned for energy. We can make fiber boards. I mean, there's other potential opportunities, and I just don't see New Hampshire being aggressive on this. Yeah, I put a climate plan forward when I was in the legislature, and it died. And
Yeah.
the committee died on the floor.
No,
So
that-
I'd love to see your department doing something with this so-called climate planning that
I would love to do that too. So Maine, there's a factory that's starting to generate wood fiber insulation in Maine. That, in my mind, that's in Maine. So there's an opportunity there. Sure.
So I'm not sure if it's a very helpful response to that to some extent, but hi, I'm Scott Mislansky. I work with the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. What you're suggesting, I think, probably makes a lot of sense, as a lot of virtual power plants and expanding that at scale. We seem to have this problem with not being able to move things fully forward in a quick enough manner. I mean, right now we've got a solar pipeline that can't seem to get connected. There's lots of arrays sitting out there waiting to get connected, and they're waiting months and months and months to get connected. There's a lot of pieces of this puzzle that are not nearly as big as starting kind of a new industry even, that we can't seem to get forward. And I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive, like you can do both at the same time, hopefully. But sometimes I feel like we are stretching out into so many directions that we can't finish one task. We can't seem to we don't even have an RPS that seems to get to where we should go. So, I mean, there's obviously some people working on the policy side and more on the regulation side, and other folks working on the programmatic side. But just want to note that we can't search out in new directions, full bore, unless we've got enough capacity to do that while we're still solving the problems of actually, solar without being connected doesn't do much for us. So there's a lot of pieces that we still need to put together. That said, I do want to go back to the virtual power plant, idea from this morning, and be thinking, I don't know, in the conversation, the statements you made earlier with Loon, and you're looking at, your ISO, what are the cues that you get? Is there any coordinated effort other than through the small pilot utility programs to say we're doing demand response, right now? Is there any coordinated effort to say now is the time you should be, curtailing, or now is the time you should, is there, the communication piece of all of this, which is part of the reason why we're all here, is extremely important. When you say you're looking to, you're looking at ISO New England site, are you just you understand how it works, so you're doing your best to choose the timing that works? I mean, that's a very small piece of this whole puzzle, but that's the question I had for you.
Thanks. We'll get to you next.
So a couple things. One, obviously, it means a tremendous amount of money to us. So, I mean, I pay attention to it. Everyone on our team pays attention to it. We have programming alerts in our snowmaking system. We use this program called Domo, which tracks everything from sales to electricity to whatever, and we have alerts set up in there. I would also say that the Ski New Hampshire group, Christmas Eve last year, I'm sitting at dinner with my family, and I start getting text messages from every other general manager in the state. Can you believe electricity is $3 a kilowatt, right? And so there is that inter-business communication. It's very much related around snowmaking and the ski industry, but Ski New Hampshire and all of the resorts, 20-something ski resorts in the state, communicate about that. And we all have different power arrangements and different agreements, and some of us have signed on to have to demand response. Some of us do it willingly. Some of us, in that instance on Christmas Eve last year, we're like, shut it all down. We can't. So we communicate. I don't know that it's some sort of formal, hey, Pat's Peak, let Loon know when this is going on. But yeah, Cliffy calls me and complains just like I would call to him and complain. So
Sharing that with other industries, I think, would be great if you're doing that kind of at a sort of grassroots level, within your industry. And I'll mention that to Clean Energy New Hampshire folks, just because I think that's great. I mean,
Can you hear me? Good. Thanks. I have a follow-up question to something that Phil said a little earlier. My name is Ralph Maima. I'm with Encore Renewables. So I'm a solar developer, but I also am a Windham County, Vermont commissioner and spent 10 years on the Energy Committee in Brattleboro. So I've sort of been on both sides of the equation. And my question is, as city or county or state officials, do you have opportunities or leverage to get involved in grid planning? Because in terms of economic development, in a lot of places in both of our states, the grid is holding back a lot of economic development, and not just distributed energy, but I mean a lot of other economic development as well. Do you have opportunities? Do you have ways of getting of putting pressure on the utilities or on the State Utility Commission to address grid shortfalls where they occur?
I don't have an answer for you on that one, but I don't have the municipal experience these other folks have.
To a certain degree, regional planning agencies through the New Hampshire Regional Planning Association could take something like that up. I think it would mean all the regional planning agencies would have to work together. Sorry, it's New Hampshire Association of Regional Planning Commissions. I think they would have to decide that that's an initiative they want to take on together. But it actually just came up at the New Hampshire Econ Forum yesterday, especially in older cities like Portsmouth, where it's a really tentative situation in downtown Portsmouth, and having new businesses come on board when energy demand and energy issues, reliability is low, has been a challenge. And that was that was actually the economic development folks saying that. So it is something that I'm going to bring up to our executive director in a deeper way to see if that is an initiative that they can take on, because it's going to affect all of us. So thank you for bringing that up.
I can add just a quick thing from the private sector. I mean, working with New Hampshire Co-op and the volume of electricity that we use and all of the different development projects that we're involved with, whether it's specific to ski area or it's third parties developing homes or hotels or other things. And we advocate, and the co-op works directly. Just yesterday, I was talking to Bill Johnstone about some reliability concerns in our grid. That's localized to us, but being the loudest voice in the room when you're talking to your utility provider and almost demanding that infrastructure needs to be there, and communicating clearly what the expectation is for future development. Again, I'm speaking Lincoln, Woodstock, our area, but we have yearly meetings with those guys where we talk about what the next 5 years of electricity use that we see from a ski resort, but also from greater development, and we're happy to communicate for the local community there on what we think the co-op needs to provide, and they've been quite reactive. So I'd encourage everyone to be doing the same things where they can.
That's Kevin Porter. We all wear multiple hats here. I'm speaking as a former Clean Energy New Hampshire board member and a small woodlot owner, to follow up on Representative Oxenham's comments. I think it's really important to remember that 40% of our energy costs in New Hampshire are for heating, are for thermal energy, and that's really, we're figuring out solar, we're figuring out grid mod. Heating is a big thing coming down the pike that we have to spend more time on. I think if anybody was at the energy conference in the spring, there was an incredible presentation on combined heat and power systems, modern wood heating systems where the waste heat is used for electricity. I'm happy to share that deck with anybody if they're interested. But again, it's really something we need to start talking more about. Thank you.
Go ahead. I'm State Senator Jim Gray. And one of the things that's disturbed me about this so far is that I hear silos, okay? I hear Nashua saying I'm going to require chargers at developments. Well, what does that do for affordable housing? tanks it, okay? I hear Burgess, okay? Yes, there was a plant that tried to make particle board in New Hampshire about 4 years ago. What happened to it? Wasn't economically viable. So whatever decisions that you come up with, don't do them in silo, okay? Think about what's happening across the state, because that's really, what has to happen. Is because yes, we need more charging stations, but if I timed housing, I've, made a problem, created a problem. So, thank you.
Now that we've gotten rid of the microphone, just one more thing to throw, one more thing to throw into the mix is microgrids. If we're talking about big picture and we're talking about climate planning, this is a life-saving development, and cities should be looking in their planning about having a safe place for people to congregate, to have police and fire on the same link of a microgrid, to have your DPW solar array or your school solar array linked into the microgrid. Thank you.
If I can, I'll say one of the best examples I can think of for a functional micro. I know Nash was thinking of it, like Loon Mountain. They've got everything behind 1 meter. If they had renewables behind there, like you'd have your own microgrid right there. You guys manage your own assets, right? So I mean that right. I mean when I try and think of, and I've heard a lot about and read about microgrids, and I think the best example I can think of in our state is like ski areas are huge endeavors with multiple buildings, multiple services, multiple large loads like lifts, and they manage their own behind the grid. If they had some generation there, there'd be a functioning microgrid there too, right? They have that islanding capacity. Oh, you're looking at me. How about more questions? We're kind of at our time. Does anybody want to squeeze one more in, or should we can kind of release people and say thank you, and we can have conversation. We got one here.
We've talked a lot about electric vehicles, but has there been thinking at the regional level about hybrids? Because I'm not sure, the CEO or outgoing CEO of Toyota's perspective is that it's not only going to be electric, it's going to be a mix of vehicles over time, depending on needs. So what's the thinking around that?
I've heard a lot of people say that, long-haul trucking is one of the hardest things to electrify, but that's one of the places where you might see hydrogen infrastructure come into play more recently. I know our offshore wind commission was originally looking at New Hampshire offshore wind resources generating hydrogen that they could bring, rather than having an electric transmission line to a substation. They were thinking about generating hydrogen, and that might be a good place to, if we have a hydrogen fuel corridor along major thoroughfares, long-haul trucking is probably one of the easiest things to convert, but maybe you have other thoughts?
Yeah. We're not necessarily promoting one or the other. These are solutions, because as you know, a lot of this is going to happen at the local level anyway. But to the point of long haul trucking, Blackburn Energy, if anyone's heard of that, based in Amesbury, I only know that because I was there, but they are trying to make some big innovations on hybrid semi trucks. So that could take that piece of it, but. We're looking, we don't necessarily do a regional portfolio standard, but understand the mix is absolutely important. Like, I own a hybrid electric. I didn't go all electric because I recognize it is tougher, and especially for some of our communities in the northern area, that might be a better solution for them than going all electric right now, especially to swallow that pill. What does that look like for us to, convince the police and the fire and other folks? So that happy medium has been, in some communities, has been an easier transition. But I agree with you.
It's a great point. And as I said earlier, when we were transitioning to electric vehicles, it's like where it makes sense, right? We are never going to have, I don't want to say never. It's very unlikely that we're going to have a snowcat that grooms 18 hours a night on batteries without charging, right? Like that's probably not going to happen reasonably. They make them. Yeah. They make them to go do cross country for 3-4 hours or something like that. But we're investing in diesel electric hybrid snowcats, right? It's interesting to hear Nashua using, we run 17 shuttle buses around the town of Lincoln. They're all diesel fuel. It's hard for me to say that, but we burn a lot of diesel fuel. So it's interesting to hear a place like Nashua using natural gas. And so there's different technologies out there, and you have to use what makes the most sense. We were darn close to buying an electric bus 3 years ago and doing the V2G thing and putting it. We're a perfect place actually to try that because of how we're using our buses and when we're using them and being able to be the battery storage and put back into the grid. But the technology just wasn't there yet, right? Like we were going to have to charge it 2.5 times just to do the local route for the day because you're driving up mountains and around corners and picking people up over here and there. And it's like, just weren't close enough, But when it's there, it'll be the right decision to make. Until then, we're exploring the natural gas route, the propane route, just more efficient Tier 4, Tier 5 engines.
My thought is don't forget that the guy who designed the light bulb worked by candlelight. As technology becomes available, everybody's going to have to choose when to integrate new technology into their lives. It's not easy for everyone, but if you've got 2 vehicles, maybe one can be an EV, right? It's not the end of the world, and you don't have to do it all at once. I'm going to say thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our audience for the great discussion. I'll be here for a few minutes if anybody wants to talk.